Hello, it's Bookish Talk, iBookBinding's podcast. Today we have two guests, Talitha Wachtelborn and Amy Kitcherside, joining us from the United Kingdom, and we're going to talk about the Society of Bookbinders International Competition. So if you can start with telling us about the competition and about, everything, I guess. Who can take part in it? What are the deadlines? What are the rules?
Well, yeah, the competition, I'm not sure actually, but it's been running quite a long time now. I think it's been going on, I don't know, at least 10 years. But we took over this just a few months ago for this new one. So the competition runs every 2 years. It was meant to run in 21, but with COVID, it all got postponed. It's an international.
Both Pavel and I loved how you fixed the year in your brochure, in your booklet.
Yeah, we've got a really nice guy called Tobin who's done all of the design for us and does all of that. So that's been great. So yeah,
looks very professional. Is the competition biennial?
Yeah, it's usually every 2 years. So the last one was in 2019. And then it got cancelled with COVID and everything that was going on. So it's now the 22 competition, and I think it always runs in conjunction with the Society of Bookbinders Conference that they hold, because the award ceremony will take place at the conference, which is really nice because there's lots of people who come to it and visit.
So the award ceremony happens in August, as far as I understand, because the conference is usually in August.
Yes, it'll happen on the first day of the conference. And usually the books have to have been made within the past 2 years. So generally, once the conference finishes, you can kind of make a binding for the competition, for the next competition. But because of this change in years with COVID, you can enter any book that's been made in the last 3 years. So anyone who prepared a binding to enter in 2021 would be able to send it for 2022. But then going forward, it will be within the last 2 years again.
So what are the categories?
There's 5 main categories. So there's a fine binding category. And they're kind of self-explanatory, but it's supposed to show excellent craftsmanship for fine bindings, usually a codex form book. There's the book arts category, which can take any kind of form that you want. And most people who enter that have done the interiors of the book as well. So it's like the whole piece and not just rebinding a book like a fine binding might be. There's a case binding category, which has to incorporate book cloth for that one. There's a restoration category, which is any binding that's been restored to its former or original condition. And there's also the historic binding category as well, which is a much more traditional kind of book that you can enter. And then there's various other sort of little awards as well that we have, which I can run through as well for you.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about them as well.
Yeah. So there's a newcomer award, which is going to be sponsored by Arthur Green. I don't know if you know him. So that's for anyone up to the age and including the age of 30, because he really wants to encourage students and younger binders to take part in the competition. And they have started learning bookbinding within the last 5 years. And I think as well that they can't have won another competition as well if they want to enter as a newcomer.
Okay.
There's the Fine Cut International Award for finishing. Harmattan Leather have their own award for forwarding. Incline Press have an animal-free binding award. Hewitt's have an excellent in design, and they also have an excellence in craftsmanship as well. And I think there's usually also a people's choice that people who are at the conference can also vote.
At the seminar.
Yeah, that's just at the conference, but that's like a little extra one that people can vote for if they're there for it.
Another reason to come to the conference.
Yeah, definitely. So there's lots of different awards.
And the rest of the categories, are they judged by a pre-selected panel?
There's a panel of 3 very top secret judges, and we're all going to meet at a undisclosed top secret location, and they're going to judge the bindings on a variety of criteria. And the judges say is final. They're all experienced bookbinders or people in the world of bookbinding. So they could be book artists, or they could be teachers, or they could be bookbinders in their own right. They could have won competitions before, so we try to have judges who have a variety of skills, so that they're not all fine binders or all book artists or something like that, so that their expertise runs across the categories.
But they will all judge the books in person, because with Designer Bookbinders Award last year, at least one of the judges had to send their representative with video. But this year, hopefully, everything will be.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
No, the plan is to have two or 3 days.
2 days.
2 days, I think it's going to be. I think it would be longer for us because we have to do all the setup and take down. But 2 days in-person judging, which would be really nice. And I think it's important if you can do that as well, obviously, so they can get the feel for the books and how they open, etc. So, with the COVID and everything, they had to do something a bit differently before.
So the books have to be sent in, and they have to arrive by, I think the deadline for them to arrive at the location they're being posted is, the 20th of May. And then we have some volunteers who are going to log all of the books and get everything ready. And then we're having a judging weekend further in the summer. And the judges will handle every book. And we have a photographer who's going to take photographs of every book for the beautiful catalog that our wonderful graphic designer, Tobin, is going to put together. And he's also a bookbinder, which is nice. So he has, he used to be a graphic designer, and now he's a bookbinder. So best of both worlds for us to have found him.
That's something we see quite often among our guests, a person who have been a graphic designer turning to be a bookbinder.
Yeah, I think they want more materiality, more tactile.
And less computers.
Yeah, I think we all want less computers now, don't we?
Yeah.
Everyone's zoomed out.
I'm so relieved that he's happy to do all of the graphics and things. So
absolutely, we're very happy to have him.
Yeah, he's done some nice sort of countdown graphics for the social media that we'll be doing over the next few months as well. So it's given it quite a nice look. So.
And will the public be able to see some of the books, maybe the winners?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a couple locations. They're going to be exhibited at Baintum's in Bath after the conference for a week or two. I think that's not totally defined yet or agreed to yet. Yeah. And then they're going to go to Shepherd's in London. So there's been a plan to have the winners exhibited further afield, but because of COVID and everything, Amy and I decided that this year we would just try to have the competition happen and have everything go to plan before trying to add too many extra things in, because it would just potentially be extra things that we would be canceling if things kind of go topsy-turvy again. So we're going to just make it happen this year, and then for the next competition we'll look at having the winners exhibited at other locations as well.
Yeah, that's a very reasonable approach. So the next competition will happen in 2 years. So it was odd years, and now it's even years.
Yeah, now it's even.
But the seminar happens every other year. So the seminar would have been 2022, but now the Society of Bookbinders seminar will be 2023.
Mm-hmm. And I understand the added bonus is that you desynchronized with the Designer Bookbinders Competition, that they will be.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, so it kind of it's quite nice that way. It kind of 1 year with one year with the other. Hopefully, it should carry on working out that way.
A bit of a provocative question: how would you differentiate the two competitions?
Well, I guess Designer Bookbinders always have the set books that you have to do when you enter that one. I can't remember if that's an international one either, off the top of my head.
believe it is.
Yeah.
But you do have the set book, and some of the criteria are different. And I think, having them separate, people can decide if they want to do one or both. Whereas before, I think people had to really make a choice about which competition they were entering, because it would be difficult for a lot of people who, work or have other jobs to do that many books that would be competition ready in 1 year. So they sort of have slightly different aesthetics, and I think they'll have different judges and things like that, and be looking for different criteria. So it's nice that there's a broader spectrum of competitions for people to enter now.
And also the 5 categories of the Society of Bookbinders Competition, they're definitely absolutely different from what Designer Bookbinders have.
What about the book arts category? I'm really curious about that one. What do you include, and what is a book? What is book arts? How do you judge that?
Well, we're not the judges, so it's not up to us to decide. So we don't really have to answer that question. But I think it has to sort of, in my understanding, it has to sort of evoke some sense of what a book can convey, or the feelings that a book conveys. A lot of times it includes traditional bookbinding skills, but in a more novel way. Sometimes it's something that would be more like a complete book, where, it has photographs or prints that somebody's made, and then they've also made the binding. But it can run the gamut. We've had things that are basically dioramas, that have a book model in there somewhere. So
sculptures in some years as well. I remember one that was kind of like a sculpture. Technically it was a book, but it was almost like an art piece.
It could be almost anything, really.
I think so, yeah. So.
It's up to the judges to decide. So we just accept it. We tell the judges this is for this category, and then they decide who wins. And we don't have to.
Yeah, I think they also kind of look at the whole concept and why they've done, a binding or the design the way that they have. I think I'm trying to remember who won last year, but I think it was that one. It had prints that folded out. But there was also the second prize. The book was in the shape of like a Georgian sort of carriage, I think it was. I can't remember their names off the top of my head. I'll have to look them up.
Yeah, they're not on the website right now, unfortunately.
Two quite different books won the first and second prize last time. So.
We talked quite a lot about what's the book, and what is a book and what isn't a book on our podcast, and it's always interesting to see even more answers to this question. And some of our guests shared their stories of being denied their books being denied the status of a book in different situations. So it's always interesting to see more objects like that, and more experiments. Definitely more experiments.
Where do you guys fall on the spectrum of what isn't a book? What would your entry for the book arts competition look like, for the book arts category?
I think I like the we talked to a Finnish bookbinder, book artist, Kaija Rantakari, and her opinion was that if it tells a story, and if probably there is at least some text in there, then you can call it a book. And I like this approach. I never tried making anything like this. So all the bindings I made were pretty traditional books and bindings, and I only probably experimented with some sculptural elements in the design of the cover or something. But I like this approach, and that's where I'd go if I wanted to go experimental.
Yeah. I think it's a nice category to have, because it does bring something else to what gets submitted. So.
How big do the submissions get? Because last summer, we saw almost 100-kilogram book in Moscow, and it was shipped to Moscow from Vladivostok, which is about 8,000 kilometers. So that was a big surprise for the library that ordered it. So.
We're hoping we won't get anything that big, but we don't have a sort of size criteria, but there is a limit to how big the cases are that it's going to go into. People have entered things in past competitions that were too big to fit into the cases, and then they had to just be out on a table, which I don't know. I mean, I'm a conservator in my day-to-day life, and so do loans with, everything needs to be locked down in a case. So having something out on a table makes me nervous. So hopefully nobody sends anything that big, but usually there's somebody who does, and we just make it work. But there isn't a size criteria, so people could send anything as long as they pay for the postage. As long as their postage is paid up and it arrives on time, anything kind of could be entered, basically.
And what about the other end of the spectrum? Because I don't think I've seen any miniature books on non-specialized competitions, because on these bigger competitions, you usually get the medium-sized books, but not miniatures.
I think it's harder to find text blocks, but I would love to see a miniature book. Because I think they're just adorable. I mean, my understanding is that it's anything where the finished binding is less than 2 inches. I would love to see that just because I think they're wonderful. I think the text box would be harder to find, but there's nothing to stop anyone from doing, entering the historic category or possibly the restoration category or the book arts category or a case binding one, I suppose, if they wanted, or fine binding. I mean, it doesn't say that it has to have a text, I suppose, does it? In the rules of the fine binding?
No, I don't think it does, actually.
So I suppose you could do that if you wanted in any of the categories. Go for it, guys.
Maybe this year, maybe next time. It's something for our viewers to try. For both of you, Amy and Talitha, what if you wanted to enter the competition, which category would you choose? Well, we understand that you cannot enter.
We're not allowed, no.
You're not allowed, but if you had this chance, if you had this opportunity.
I would probably go for fine binding or possibly book arts, because I like doing printmaking and I have an illustration background as well, so it's always quite nice to explore that side as well. But yeah, it would be fine binding or book arts for me if I was going to enter.
And I would probably go for restoration or a historic binding, because I work in a great old library. So I've got, a long list of things that I want to make copies of and bindings that I think are wonderful that I want to have a go at recreating. But I'll just keep a hold of that list until we're not the organizers anymore.
Yeah.
Speaking of restoration, this is the category that intrigued me a lot, because I assume that apart from the finished product, one has to send some kind of documentation of the process, what they did, so that you know that it is an actual, that it's not overly restored, etc.
They do have to talk about what they've done and. I think send some photographs in and talk about what they've used. And I think because it's a restoration category, not a conservation category, the focus is sort of on it looking as new or as close to as originally bound as possible. Whereas in conservation, it's a bit more about saving as much of the original material as possible while still making it function. So the aesthetics are quite important for the restoration binding. But it's an interesting category. So, and there's always some amazing entries in there. There's not as many entries in historic binding and restoration as in fine binding or case binding, but they're all amazing. All the books are amazing. They're all wonderful. Come see the competition winners. See all the books. Buy the catalog.
Definitely. We talked to several bookbinders about this project Tomorrow's Past, including Kathy Abbott. Would something that fits this concept fit within the restoration category, or it's a step too far?
That's an interesting question, actually. I don't know if that might depend on the judge's feelings.
I mean, it's a new binding, so it's not returning the original binding back to its original condition. I mean, I think a lot of them are could be entered in possibly case binding or artist books, but I think because most of the time they're often on, well, not all the time, but a lot of the times the ones that I'm familiar with are bindings that were created that evoke historic structures for books that didn't have covers. So if there's no binding to return to its original state, I think it couldn't be part of the restoration category. That some of them, I mean, I don't think it could be historic either, because it's a new take on a historic binding rather than like a model or a modern version of a historic binding, because they're putting their own stamp on it and sort of improving a lot of historic bindings. It's a good question. I mean, it would all come down to the judge. So what we think doesn't really matter, because it would all come down to the judges and their word is final.
There might be some interesting conversations going on judging weekend. I imagine there usually is, actually, but we haven't done one yet, so we'll find out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
We've heard it's a bit like herding cats, keeping them on task, because we'll put something amazing in front of them, and they'll start oohing and ahhing and debating if it gets this category or that category, and if it wins this award or that award, and we'll have to get them to look at all the other books that are sent in and make sure that they award something for each of the categories. So it'll be quite full on. And then
how many books are we talking about?
We don't know.
Well, we don't know, but I think in the past, there was around 80 last time. So we're not sure whether because there's been an extra year, whether there'll be even more entries because people have had a bit longer to bind, or they, are just really excited to there'll be a competition running again, or whether people will just not have time to have thought about it with everything else going on. But hopefully we'll have a good turnout. And I think usually around 80 in the past. So there is quite a lot to go through on the judging weekend.
And we'll be photographing every book that is entered as well for the catalog. So every book that is sent in to us is featured in the catalog that all of the entrants get as well.
Mm-hmm. That's nice. Yeah. So it's an international competition, but I guess there are more participants from the United Kingdom, because it's a competition in the United Kingdom, or not.
I mean, there's people who enter from South America, Australia, Switzerland, Spain. There's quite a fair number that do enter from the UK. I mean, I think part of it is shipping, unfortunately. Yeah. Because there are great binders around the world. It's just shipping costs are kind of ridiculous now. And then when you have something that you've spent so much time on, the insurance as well on top of that, it can get quite expensive. And they do also have to pay for the return postage of their bindings. So it's, how expensive that is times two. And bookbinding is, of course, not the world's most lucrative field. So they have to balance all of those things. But we are very happy and encouraging of people to send their international books in. We would love to have as many from around the world as possible.
Definitely, because it would be so lovely to see such a range, and also get an idea of what binders elsewhere are doing, the kind of work they're doing. I think when, obviously Society of Bookbinders in the UK, and I think most people are quite involved in the Society and Designer Bookbinders as they're, different organisation, but most people are part of both. Do you have a good idea of the kind of work that the binders are producing? So it's always exciting to see what else is going on and the different kind of methods and styles that people use from all over. So we're hoping that we'll get lots of people interested.
And people do travel, I know that Kathy's gone to South America, and, Nikki Oliver's gone to Australia to teach, and people from other places have come here. So, and the people that they've that Nikki or Kathy or others have gone to teach around the world, there are bookbinding communities there that have brought them over. So there are vibrant areas of bookbinding, and there's, the Center for Book Arts in San Francisco and in New York and other places. So it is happening in other pockets of the world. So hopefully we see lots of examples of that.
Yeah. That's something that we wanted to sort of touch upon with the Spanish version of our podcast, because there is a huge community of bookbinders in South America, in Chile and Argentina and other countries as well. But for most part, it's completely unknown to European bookbinders and book lovers, and for the people from the United States and Canada as well. But there are definitely a lot of books there, a lot of interesting ideas and bookbinders there. So I also hope that they will send some objects
definitely.
to the competition.
Yeah.
So
it'll make it more interesting if they do. I think the fine binder last time was from Switzerland, the person who won, and historic and restoration were there were two guys from Spain that won that, I think, last time. So
and what about the historic bindings? Because those could be very different traditions from around the world. Because when you say historic bindings and when you look at your brochure, well, there's the codex of the European tradition, but there are also Islamic bindings. There are also Japanese, Chinese, Indian traditions. Have you had any experience with those in your competition?
I'm not sure in the past, because we didn't. This is our first year organising it, so we don't.
Can't speak to all the past ones.
Speak to all of them, but yeah, I hope there is, and there will be. There was, and there will be this time. But I think it's an interesting category that I think the historical binding category doesn't tend to get as many submissions, unfortunately. So I think it would be really nice to encourage that. It certainly doesn't have to fit one mold. I think
it does not need to be a Western historic, medieval manuscript type binding with clasps and things like that. There's some great work that's been done about historic bindings in Mexico. There's historic bindings, from the States, like scabbard bindings and things like that. As you mentioned, Islamic bindings, palm leaf bindings. Any of that stuff, I think, could be entered and would be really great to see.
There are some really exquisite scrolls being produced with boxes for them and systems.
Well, that's getting tricky though. Now is the scroll a book, or is that a book arts category?
Yeah. I also was. It also was always interesting to me that for historic bindings, if you see in a medieval book, for example, there are always all these imperfections due to a lower level of technology, other tools, or something like that. So if you make if you go for a historic binding category, should you follow and sort of apply all these imperfections in your work, or should you try to make this at least fit within the style, but still make it perfect? So what's the right approach?
Well, again, it's up to the judges to say, but I think a sort of similar example is like the Parthenon marbles. Everybody thinks they're perfect in their totally white classic look, but they would have originally been really bright and quite garish to our modern eyes. So, when these books were new, they would have looked different than they do now. They've had hundreds of years of hands on them, and, they've had like all those oils kind of been rubbed into them, and the corners are softened, and everything's kind of like settled into place a bit. But when you make a new binding, it has straight boards and square corners, and they kind of always look too new. I think, in a way, but, what are you going to do? Drop it a few times before you send it in? I don't know if you'd win if you did that. So it might look more historic, but might not win if you did it.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that's most of the things we wanted to ask you, and thank you very much for coming over to our podcast and talking about the competition.
Thank you for inviting us.
We hope some of our viewers will decide to join the competition, to take part in this competition this year or maybe in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
Anything works. So please consider that. We'll post links to the competition down below.
Yeah, that would be great. And it really is open for anyone to apply if they want to. Like, you don't have to, even if you aren't young enough to be in the newcomer award, it's such a lovely thing to do and a goal to work towards. And I think it's open for everyone to put through their bindings if they want to. So you don't have to be intimidated, I guess, is what I would say, of being a master binder. So
just do it, because it's a great learning experience, to enter the competition. Go to the Society of Bookbinders website and click on the international competition. Yeah, great. Join the mailing list. We'll send out information. There will be a form that will be going out for you to enter however many books you want. It's all gonna happen. May 20th will be the deadline for them to arrive. Yeah. So get binding.
Yeah, you still have some time. Yeah, but do it fast. Okay, perfect. So as usual, I'd like to say thanks to our viewers in the first place, and to our supporters on Patreon, because, well, without your money, we cannot edit our videos. And if you have some, spare a couple of bucks per month, please consider checking the link below and joining the crowd of our patrons. And see you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.